Do you crave better self esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we talked about perfectionism and healing our emotions associated with this mindset. Today, I want to shift our focus a little bit toward another area of our emotional journey that keeps us stuck and distracted from living our best life: unforgiveness. I know firsthand how real the struggle is to forgive and move on. I also know how forgiveness empowers us to confidently reclaim our peace, happiness, and self-worth. So, if you're done letting unforgiveness steal your peace, joy, and your direction in life, may this 5-part series help you level up your self-love game as you continue to restore your inner warrior to live with fierce confidence. Forgiveness is a complex concept and something many of us struggle with. For this reason, I've broken down the forgiveness series into 5 episodes to give each defining element its own space to breathe. In this episode, you'll gain better clarity about how forgiveness and unforgiveness work. You'll learn more about this forgiveness focus, the struggle to let go of offense, resentment, and bitterness, and get a behind-the-scenes look at what I've learned firsthand about operating in unforgiveness and how adopting a forgiving mindset is a powerful self-love and self-centered act. That's right, I said self-centered. In the remaining 4 episodes in this series, we'll explore deep hurt and pain associated with hurt and offense, fear of vulnerability and reopening wounds, need for justice and accountability, and moving beyond our internal barriers and negative emotional reactions to rebuild our forgiveness mindset. And before I get into this episode, if you haven't already, please consider joining my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community support. If you're ready to boldly step into a life with improved happiness and confidence, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your inner healing journey with this next episode. And welcome back to all my listeners already walking with me down this restoration path. I'd like to begin this first episode by establishing what forgiveness is and what unforgiveness does to our emotional well-being. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to let go of our negative feelings toward people and situations that have hurt and or offended us. When we make a decision to forgive, we are cutting ourselves free from the dead weight and the heavy burden of those adverse emotions that really only affect us. We are not forgetting or ignoring what hurt or offended us or the person behind those actions. We are not letting those who've hurt or offended us get away with it, as the saying goes. I know sometimes we can get stuck in that trap where we feel like if I forgive them, then they think they're off the hook and that I've forgotten it and that they can do it again or that they got away with it. Unforgiveness, on the other hand, is a deliberate decision to hold on to a hurt or an offense. It makes us inwardly and outwardly bitter, resentful, angry, and thus we're miserable to be around. It also hurts us more than those around us. So think about that. Let that sink in. Unforgiveness hurts us more than it hurts those around us, including the people who have offended us. It doesn't really punish that other person at all. It's like I mentioned this in my self-help book, Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, which there's a link to this in the show notes below. And I also revisit this topic again in my forthcoming self-help book, Restore Your Inner Warrior, the Don't Drink the Poison message.
So you know how that analogy goes, that bitterness is the poison that we drink hoping to get the other person sick. It doesn't work that way. When we keep drinking that bitterness into our figurative life, it just keeps making us sick, making us sick. It kills us slowly, even if it doesn't kill us altogether. And anybody who's been sick and is dying of something or has escaped a near-death experience knows how much it sucks to be that sick. So to think about how this one act of just operating in unforgiveness gets us stuck in that cycle of putting poison into our body. It literally puts poison into our body. It also affects other areas of our thinking. Resentment and the desire for retribution stem from bitterness. So when you think about the concept of always wanting to, make sure somebody pays for it, make sure they learn a lesson. When we start to plan and plot, how am I going to get even with that person? How am I going to show them nobody does that to me? When we start to get into that mindset, we start to fall into these cycles and you get trapped in these cycles. And not to say that there isn't a place for people to learn their lesson when they're intentionally harming people or offending them. It's just to say that vigilante justice this way is not necessarily the way that you want to go about it. There are systems in place, and then there are times where you have to decide, is there really justice for this situation, or do I need to let go of certain things so that I can move on in freedom in my life and not have these things holding me back? It makes us negative in our thinking overall, and this affects all of the different areas in our life. It makes us the toxic cocktail that no one wants to drink. So when we come back to that don't drink the poison message, we, if we keep stewing in our bitterness and our resentment, we become that person that is the toxic drink that nobody wants to drink. You can tell it's bubbling over like a brew that a witch just put together. And it stinks from this far away. You're like, I'm not tasting that. I'm not drinking that. So we become that thing that starts to show the outward stink, so to speak. And people want to then avoid our stink and they want to avoid us altogether. So it really is an important concept. When we think about forgiveness and operating in unforgiveness, this is a really important topic to focus on, especially when we're talking about our own emotional healing and about rebuilding and restoring our lives so that we can confidently and boldly live to our fullest and enjoy every part of that life. So, this is why I open the series by examining our struggle to let go of offense, resentment, and bitterness. People are going to hurt and offend you. There is no way around it. Some people will even do it intentionally with malice. We must choose how we respond to it. So I've talked about this in a lot of the different episodes about having our eye on like the end game plan and what we want out of particular things. Like you're going to have different purposes and different plans. But when we think about our character, for instance, how we want to operate, we have to have an action plan. We have to have an end game in mind. So when we have that all planned out and we know, I'm not really sure all the steps that I have to take to get to that end goal, but I know that there are things that I can and can't do, or I learn along the way, there are things I can and can't do that are going to set me back or push me forward faster to that goal, then we have to make adjustments and take notes of those things. So in that process, we have to figure out how we're going to respond to these different situations. And in some cases, we have to know upfront, how are we going to respond to situations? So when we talk about like the intentionally, vindictive, spiteful person, which we all have them in our circles, whether they're in our family or our work environment or our school environment or our friend circle or the extended friend circle, you've got the spouses of your friends, and, sometimes it's that individual or a friend of a friend who always comes along to everything. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of different, instances, fill in the blank. We all have several of those people in our life. And so I was just talking with a loved one recently about having a good game plan about how you're going to operate with people who do chronic, offenses. They're chronically offensive, they're spiteful, they got their own issues. And to forgive them is not to, again, say that their behavior is okay and that you're still keeping them in their life. Sometimes we have to keep people at a distance, but we also kind of can't cut them out of our life altogether because they're a part of a larger circle of people that we are associated with. So in those instances, we have to have a game plan. How are we going to navigate the space? If you've already talked to that person several times and they know how they make you feel, and they know that some of the things that they're doing are dysfunctional or wrong, and they're not willing to make changes in their own behavior, they're not willing to get the help that they need, that's on them. And you can't change them. You kind of have to like let the line out a little bit, just like you do when you're raising kids or you're babysitting kids. And you're like, all right, I got to let the line out a little bit, give them space to either do the right thing or do the wrong thing. And then they show you. Because people can say, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I won't do that again or whatever. And then you're back in the situation. And the chronic pattern happens over and over and over again. And you're like, why do I keep giving this person a second chance? So you don't always have to give people a second chance. In some instances, you need to have a plan to just navigate the same spaces that you're going to be in. How long will you entertain the person when they start to slip into being hurtful, spiteful, vengeful? How long are you going to stay there? You need to have, what is your exit strategy? How are you going to navigate and inhabit this space? What are the things that you might say? What are the things that you might do? You really have to have these ideas and concepts in mind. You have to already play them out in your head, especially in these chronic situations. You're not ignorant to the fact that it's likely going to happen again in the future. Like you might have a great job and there's just one person in there and there's no way to get rid of that employee. And so how do you navigate that and your peers? So it's not like you can just, again, you are not the one who can fire them. Maybe it's your boss's kid who has the job and you love your boss and you love all your other colleagues and it's just this one bad seed. And again, there is no perfect work environment. So it's almost like God in the universe's way of saying, you need to keep working these things out in your character. I'm going to keep sending you this bad seed until you do. And even when you do, you're still going to keep getting this bad seed because maybe there's something in that bad seed that needs to be exposed to you in your moment of growth that inspires them or is a place where then they can receive some kind of conviction in their own behavior. I don't really know. I don't try to always psychoanalyze what's going to happen for other people because it's not my concern. And you can just lose yourself to the idea of, being more focused on, again, we're talking about forgiveness and unforgiveness, being more focused on what's going to happen to the other person, what's the outcome. And really, the outcome is keep it on yourself. What do I need to take out of this? How do I need to respond? And maybe it's I just need to be like, okay, and just walk away. Just walk away. Like right when things start to take that turn, like you just pull the plug. Don't feed the monster, just walk away. And there's one more point I want to mention. We also, in those instances, when we forgive somebody who is maybe a chronic offender in our life, or maybe they're a chronic offender in this area to a lot of people that we see, and we just happen to get caught in the crossfire, every now and then, or they hurt or offend us for the first time. It doesn't really matter if they're a chronic offender or not. But God in the universe will deliver vengeance far worse or far more correcting. There's a good word. Far more correcting than we could ever plot out and orchestrate and follow through in, ever. In our wildest dreams and our best planning. We could never plot it out. And I have so many stories. So when I was thinking about what do I want to share, and some of them are like extreme stories where I go, oh, I almost get really, really sad. It's like I can't even take pleasure in what kind of correction caught up with that person. Because again, everything you put out there, you're gonna get back. There are consequences. We talk about this in another couple of the other episodes that I've done in the last few weeks. For everything, every action, there are effects and consequences. There's those short-term things that get set into motion, and then there are those long-term things that the trajectory is set into motion with those effects, and they cannot be avoided. You can skip through parts of the system only for so long it catches up with you. And again, it doesn't matter if it catches up with you because you just did it once or you did it over and over and over and you're like, I keep cheating the system. It catches up. And when it does, that vengeance could be the type of thing that literally knocks your feet from underneath you. And this is what happened to someone. So years ago, we had an employee in our family business. And this employee, I started to notice he was really creepy. I got a couple of complaints from a couple of our female customers. And I was like, oh God, well, he's not alone when he goes into these houses. He is with another tech. And I don't, I kind of was already like, I'm disenchanted with this guy. Let me figure out how to replace him, how to get rid of him. And it was complicated and convoluted. And I will spare you all the reasons why it was not very easy to get rid of him. But he started to show signs, predatory activities with one of my preteen daughters. He started to show an interest with and taking modeling pictures and all this other stuff. He was a photographer that he advertised back on MySpace when he was also working with us. So he is preying on my daughter, and I'm already aggravated with this stuff over here. And my husband is just ready to break this guy's neck. He's just this little tiny guy, and he's just ready to break his little pencil neck. He used to call it a pencil neck. I'm going to break his pencil neck. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You're not going to go to jail or have a criminal record over this. Once we realized it was predatory with our daughter, we were like, okay, we're going to move fast. Like, this cannot happen. We cannot trust it. Then, when I started investigating into him, I started learning that he kind of has a little bit of a case started against him at this time. And he was going through a divorce because his wife had gotten sick and tired of the predatory behavior also. And I tried reporting it and I couldn't get anybody to even take it serious. You know, that you want to report an almost crime. Like, I want to start a trail. I just want to start a paper trail. Can you just take this information down? Because God forbid something actually legitimate happens. Now you have a paper trail. I'm not asking you to pursue anything. I just want to file a complaint. I just want to do something. And we were kind of like, just, shoot away. And I left that with, again, this decision. Am I going to forgive this? Certainly this person's not off the hook, but am I going to forgive this individual, let it go, because it's going to steal my peace? I know that my daughter's safe at this point, and I'm going to watch all of her social media. I'm going to make sure he doesn't try to reach out to her in any other capacity. She knew that if he did, she was to let us know. She was actually the one who was even saying, he creeps me out. I get it. She was just about to turn 12. And like I've been dealing with since I was 11, she's been dealing with creepy, predatory men of all ages giving her unwanted attention. So here she was, pointing out to me, I don't really like the way this guy makes me feel. Okay, so fast forward, I finally talked my husband into like, let it go. And he still was kind of holding on to it a little bit, but I said, we are not doing anything. We're not going to be vengeful. We're not going to come up with a plan. We're going to release it to God, release it to the universe. Things always catch up to people. And that's how I convinced my husband to let's just let it work itself out, because there's nothing that we can do. And this person did go away. We never heard his name until like a couple months ago. So this was several years ago. So now a couple months ago, we ran into somebody who knew him and knew he worked for us and kind of knew a little tiny bit about the history of like, yeah, he was a little creepy. Like, it turns out everybody in town knew he was a little creepy, which is why he fled town and started over somewhere else. But again, something caught up with him. And the system that he learned how to manipulate isn't the thing that caught up with him. What caught up with him is he pissed the wrong people off. So he eventually got so arrogant and so cocky and so predatory that he was getting away with things that somebody came and found him with a group of individuals, and they beat him to a pulp. They beat him to an inch of his life. And to this day, he doesn't walk right. He will never fully recover from that beating. And I'm not taking pleasure in it. I'm saying he was doing awful things. And I just wanted to spare anybody from having anything awful happen at his hands. And I couldn't. I was powerless in what I tried to do. And I had to decide it is not up to me to police the world. It's up to me to protect my own family. I tried doing all the other right things. And then the justice system wasn't for me in that time. So let it go. Then I hear that it caught up with him. And it caught up with him with a big vengeance. I don't take pleasure in it, but it was like, wow, what a reminder that there's power in just letting things go. And eventually, you cannot outrun the consequences of your own actions. And I have story after story of that, but this one really, really hit me really hard. So my first line of defense in operating with a forgiveness mindset is to practice mindful assessment strategies. You've heard me talk about this a lot in different episodes, this mindfulness is really a thing. You have to be the steward over your life, and all of your life matters. And part of being a good steward over your life and life matters is being aware. You have to be the most aware person of all the details that explain your life, that make up your life experiences. And when you don't know those things, you have to get to know them. You have to get to the underlying meanings and get to the underlying things that help you get to those meanings. So it's a little bit of an archaeological dig, so to speak, to keep getting at those things. But when I've done this in the past in my own experiences, it has helped me separate the offender and the offense from me and my identity. That's something that happens a lot when we are hurt or we are offended and we are unable to forgive these offenses and get over the hurt. We not only have that bitterness that makes us kind of like, ugh, to be around, we also start to wrap our identity around these things. And that's the last thing we want to do. Because if we can trace back to, we have to have a plan for the character that we want to be. That's not what we want to let to get in to influence our character. It gets us trapped in that victim mode, and then our identity starts to get wrapped around it. And if you've ever listened to somebody who has no ability to forgive and work through their woundedness, you'll see that come out in them. Their whole identity is wrapped up in people just validating and just relating and just feeling like, oh, I'm so sorry, my heart breaks for you. They just keep going over and over. And of course, that's not necessarily the way that we feel better about being offended or being hurt. And so you can see that sets you into a vicious cycle where you're just chasing your tail, you're just chasing the validation, and you tend to make it like your anthem. It's the thing you play with every new person you come in contact with, and it becomes your identity. When people talk about you, when your name comes up, they'll often associate these areas of woundedness and offense with it. And a lot of times, too, just to talk about the elephant in the room, people will start to look at you because often you're talking about the people who have offended you and hurt you, and they start to think, you know, did you talk to that other person, or what have you done to get past this stuff? And then they start to wonder, do they talk about me this way too when I'm not around? Not just areas of being wounded and offended, but do they talk about me like this when I'm not around to other people? And so it starts to make people second guess if you're safe and if you're trustworthy. Can I get close to this person? Do I want to get close to a person whose identity is wrapped around their areas of woundedness? And don't get me wrong. I know that our areas of woundedness shape us and they shape our character. What I'm saying in this instance is we don't want to let our character be shaped until our identity is our woundedness. It's supposed to shape us into the version of ourselves that we are striving to become. And so it doesn't get accomplished that way if we're just letting our identity become the wound. We're trying to rise above that. We're trying to heal from those things, not hold on to them like they're a trophy. So when we sift through these different types of details, it offers us clarity about the larger picture. Again, I keep talking about that in other episodes, but same here when you're talking about an instance where you've been offended or wounded, it gives you the larger picture. And that could, number one, help you get a better understanding of the other person's motives, circumstances, chronic behaviors, things of that nature. Again, it doesn't dismiss it. You're just trying to understand it because you really do have to understand things before you allow yourself to fully respond to anything. You can have that initial feeling, that initial intuition, that initial reaction. All of those things are valid. But when you're all done processing all those things, your last and final thoughts on this situation should be looking at the larger picture, should be seeking to understand all of the moving parts of that situation, of that experience, so that you can make a sound, informed judgment of it. It helps us process the fact that we didn't deserve the hurt or the offense. And oftentimes that's the case, that we don't deserve to be hurt and offended. Not every single instance where we feel hurt or offended was an intentional act or was something that was an intentional act or was something that we didn't deserve. But I'm talking about the majority of the time. We don't deserve it. Maybe we're just a decent person, something bad happened to us. That's the type of situation that I'm kind of focusing on here. When we do focus on these particular things, it helps us see the other person as a human being as well. So I said this a lot to my kids when I was raising them. I say this a lot to my husband too, because he does really struggle with this area of unforgiveness. And it's a topic that he and I have been revisiting often the last few weeks, is that you have to be able to separate a person from their actions and their behaviors. People are complex. So every single person has a lot of things that make them good and make them bad. Now, yeah, are there people who just have horrible, unredeeming qualities? Perhaps. There are a few. We could probably count them on both of our hands in the entire world. But the rest of people have redeeming qualities. And I'm kind of reminded of, so right now I'm binge watching when I have time, and it's awful because sometimes I'm up till 2 or 3 in the morning with my mind going zzz after this podcast, and I'm binge watching Dexter. And I know I'm late to the game, but I think about Dexter when I think about complex characters and redeeming qualities. So he has to have more redeeming qualities than fallen hero, monster villainous qualities in order for him to make a strong protagonist that keeps us coming back, that keeps us caring about him continuing on and continuing to live. So I'm not going to digress into all of those different things, but that's a good example of you can even be a serial killer and have good redeeming qualities. So every single instance has to come under this. Can I separate the person from their actions? And then that makes it a lot easier to forgive. It makes it a lot easier to see the larger picture. It makes it a lot easier to learn something about yourself. That's the other thing. When we start to dissect all of the different moving parts, we learn something about ourselves. We learn something about that character that we say we want to continue to grow into. How are we going to know what's going to make us better? What's going to improve? What do we need to change? What will we no longer tolerate? What will we tolerate? What are those boundaries going to be? How are we going to learn all those things if we're not looking at previous experiences of being hurt to come up with some of these criteria? We have to look at these big picture things, and we have to look at that complexity. When we do this, it also helps us empathize with others. And that's a really critical character trait that we should all want to have. We should all want to empathize with other people. And maybe it's not to empathize with the chronic offenders. Maybe it's to empathize with the people who are chronically offended, who are chronically hurt and wounded by that. I'm here today because I learned to be empathetic to things that I suffered through and figured out a way to get beyond. And now I'm excited about coming and talking to you every week about how I did it and about ways that you could do the same thing for yourself. So maybe that empathy comes in a different form. You can't limit how we get to benefit from these exercises and from the outcomes of these exercises. Just know that there are the ones I'm mentioning and ones I don't even know to mention, and ones I don't even have time to mention in this episode that isn't focused on those things. But it also shows us invaluable details about how to redefine certain relationships that are important to us and when to cut ourselves free from those that aren't. So there will be those instances, even in circles of friends, even in circles with family members, where you have to make that tough decision that I've tried. I've tried to talk to that person. I've tried to tell them. I've tried to just walk away. I've tried to, and they're still wreaking havoc. Where you say, I just can't be around that person. Or you say, this is a loved one. I want to have some kind of relationship with them. And you have to make those really tough decisions. But it's easier to do that when you're assessing these larger picture items, when you're trying to seek a better understanding, finding those underlying meanings, so that then you can sit down with all of this information because it's intel, and you can redefine these interactions or decide which ones are like, no way, I have boundaries and this is the last straw. No way. And that's okay to do that too. Because again, when you have those chronic situations where you've already talked to that person until you're blue in the face over and over and over again, same conversation. It's like Groundhog's Day. Wake up, do it again. Wake up, do it again. You start to lose your mind because you're like, oh my God, I've told you 1,000 times already. and they still continue to do it. And that's a them problem. But they can say, oh, I'm really sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to leave you out. Oh, I didn't. It wasn't personal. All that stuff. But they'll show you by their actions. And when their actions continue to do the same thing, and you start to go, okay, they're no longer ignorant. The second time, okay, well, maybe they're a little ignorant still. Let's talk again. Okay, the third time, the fourth time. You get to so many times where you're like, okay, I'm going to forgive you because I'm not going to carry that toxic crap around, but we're done. I'm going to forget about you too. Okay. And that's okay to come to that place. And I had an instance where I was getting a refresher course in some of these things when I was working on this project. So I have a book coming out that I co-authored. It's called USA versus Raj. And I've gotten to work with this incredible surgeon and humanitarian and activist to co-author his memoir. And it's a gripping tale. He was falsely arrested and imprisoned for 3.5 years awaiting his trial before he finally got a chance to go before a jury and get acquitted. 12-1 unanimously. And it's an incredible story. And as I was working through the manuscript and as I was interviewing him, there were so many instances where he had to operate by his own set of morals and belief. And so many of those things are informed by operating with a forgiving mindset. And there were times where I was like, wow, I thought I was really challenged and put under the fire to be forgiving. And here's this person who I have never been through something quite that bad. I've never spent 1,301 days in prison waiting for trial, knowing I'm innocent, going through all of these different pre-trial strategies and pre-trial things, learning all of the folly that our own government is trying to do because this is their poster child case and they don't care about justice. They just want to win at all costs. And it's like all of this is there and I'm looking at it and I'm seeing him just being knocked down, knocked down, knocked down, and just saying, I refuse to operate in bitterness and I refuse to give up hope. And it was so encouraging to say, we sometimes need a reminder and an example that is far more extreme than anything we've ever experienced to give us a healthy perspective or to refresh our perspective on not allowing all of these things to steal our character, to steal our belief, to steal our moral fiber, because then we become a version of ourselves that we hate in other people. And we don't want to become a version of ourselves that we hate in other people. Protect yourself. Don't just protect your peace. Don't just protect your time. Don't just protect your space. Protect being influenced to be turning into the people that are doing things that you despise. Don't aspire to be like the people who are doing things that you despise. This leads me to my second line of offense in operating in a forgiveness mindset, not allowing bitterness and resentment to poison our internal world. This inevitably makes our external world and interactions toxic as well, like I mentioned before. So let me start by emphasizing everything in our internal world dictates how we respond to our external one. There's no way around it. You know that saying that, from the abundance of the heart? Really, our heart is the spirit guide to our mind and our soul, and everything comes forth from that attitude. Everything. What we think begins in our heart, and then how we react is this mind-heart connection. And a lot of times we try to go through life with a disconnect between these two. And really, our real power is learning how to braid. We need to bring that third cord into the mind-heart matter. And that's why a lot of us, we lean heavily into our spiritual life because that's that tri-cord that we fold in. So we've got our heart, we've got our spirituality, and then we've got our mind and our thinking, and we're weaving these three together. And you know that three-ply cord is very strong. And that's where we draw our strength, and that's where we draw our guidance, and that's where we draw just that practical every day. I mean, think about it. I'm using an analogy that ends up giving you a rope. How basic and mundane is a rope? And yet it becomes this really strong device and tool that we have in our lives that can do all types of things. I just moved a fridge yesterday, and thank God for ropes. Thank God for being able to tie things down and go 70 miles an hour on the expressway with a fridge in your trailer, like thank God for ropes. They're simple, but very powerful and very effective and efficient. So when we think about this mind-heart connection, every thought, action, and reaction is going to stem from this central space, the heart. It's going to stem from the heart. Our thoughts and emotions don't do well if we aren't centered properly. So, what is your center? So maybe that's the strategy you have to be thinking about when you're thinking about what's my playbook, what's my ultimate game plan, is what's my true center? And I'm starting to move up to braid all these things together because that braided cord is your character. So what is my center? And how am I going to rebuild or strip down, prune away the things that don't belong at that center, which again, unforgiveness does not belong at that center. So, how am I going to do all of these things to keep this healthy? Our physical health is also impacted by our emotional health. I'm not going to get into all of the ways, but you can search yourself and see that the stress hormones wreak all kind of havoc on our physical bodies, not just our emotional and mental health. It really does something to the chemicals in our body. It makes us sick. Think about when you're feeling so anxious and so stressed out, how quickly do you become sick to your stomach? Suddenly you don't want to eat because all those chemicals are in your stomach. They're in your GI tract. I don't want to eat. I feel awful. Or, you read all this stuff right now about how cortisol is affected by this cortisol is a stress hormone. So all of us who are like trying to deal with like, I don't need any extra belly fat or I don't need extra fat around, all my problem areas, trying to reduce my cortisol. Well, holding on to unforgiveness and getting that bitterness and that resentment and that anger and that just that agitation that we carry around everywhere, that that triggers all the physical effects also. But at a very simple level, these things they work together. What we allow to fester in our emotional space affects our physical health. And to compound this, the physical effects are usually long term and very difficult to reverse. So, where we might be able to kind of nip in the bud some emotional wounding that we have, when we allow the internal stuff in our emotional space to go unchecked, it literally does stuff to our physical body that does long-term effects. And you know how hard it is to undo one little thing that goes wrong in your physical body. Think about how hard it is to regain your health in a particular way, and you're compounding it by holding on to this bitter and this resentment, and then you're taking it out into every other space of your life, and just see the overarching effect that this has on the long-term lifestyle. It's detrimental to your health on so many levels. So, in closing, it's important for us to get at the root of our struggle to forgive. We have to find our way to that root. This requires us to explore the emotions that drive our unforgiveness. So, coming back to assessing what is it that's driving our unforgiveness? When you can start to get at the root of that, it helps you to make those quick, easy decisions to, I'm going to let this go. However, that can be the however, dot, dot, dot. Figure out what that is for you. And it's not going to be one formula fits all. I'm going to forgive however, or I'm just going to forgive and move on because this is not going to take another moment of my time. What am I going to do with my one beautiful life? I'm not going to waste it on losing sleep or losing peace over this thing, holding on to an offense that doesn't even affect the offender anyway. So I've mentioned a couple of strategies in some of the previous episodes, and I'm just going to throw a few out here for you to try so that as we're working through this forgiveness and unforgiveness series, you can start trying and applying some of these strategies. And then hopefully, when we come back to the next episode, you'll have a little bit of experience with trying some of these things or at least one of these things. Please try at least one. And then you can keep building on this so that you walk away from this 5-part series with a whole toolbox full of things that you can do and you understand how to use the tools. That's the thing. It's not enough to just give you the tools. I want to help you also know how to use the tools as well, because that knowledge is really powerful. So I know I say this all the time, but journaling is super important. If you don't want to call it journaling, call it brainstorming, call it free writing, call it whatever you want to call it. Get a pen or a pencil and write in a notebook, write on a piece of paper. So journaling or brainstorming to uncover the emotional triggers and woundedness. You can research the things that you uncover to gain better understandings and also to gain new strategies. I can't give you all the strategies. We just don't have enough time in every day. Now, if you want to work with me in the future, I'm going to be doing coaching, one-on-one sessions. We can explore this type of thing in greater depth, but I can't do it in the course of, this short clipped episode. I can't do it. I can't even do it in a 5-part series. It's very nuanced. You also can begin the grieving and healing process as you take the first step to forgive. I do talk about this in more depth in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. So again, if you want to check that out, you can find a link in the show notes below. Seek outside help when you cannot cope or process your hurt or your woundedness or your offense on your own. You have to be willing to seek that outside help. Sometimes self-help and all of these different strategies are just not going to be enough. And that's okay. You need to know when it's time to call in support. You got to call in more reinforcement. That's okay. We all have times where we have to do that. And what that's going to look like is going to be different, even different from situation to situation. You might not have to take everything to a therapist, but maybe you have a mentor. Maybe you have a close family member that you can trust, that you can say something to, and they're going to give you sound advice that directly speaks into your life because they know your life. They know what your objectives are. So sometimes those people we're really close to are going to give you that really quick. And you're like, wow, how did you come up with that so quick? Because I know you. Because I know what you want to get out of this. And I know what you saying right now, I'm going to show them. That isn't what you want. That isn't who you want to be. And you might need that person to, start holding you accountable in that area when you start to fall off the track of what to do and what not to do. I know that's been very helpful to me. And also, I found myself doing that a lot with loved ones as well. Just nudging them right on track because I know very well what they're after. I've made it my business to get to know what they're after because the last thing I want to do is give them blanket advice all the time. My God, they're my loved ones. I want them to know I'm listening. I care, and I'm thinking about what could help them. Before I open my mouth, I'm not just like, blah, well, you should just try what everybody else is trying. That's not really helpful. Sometimes that's really overwhelming to someone who's in the crisis and who's not able to forgive others. There's also the instance where we need to sometimes forgive ourselves. So we might not react the way we want to, or we might keep putting ourselves into chronic situations that are clearly ignoring our boundaries, and we are not making the necessary changes to put up the protections, to have a plan that we don't continue to fall into that same cycle again and again. And we have to be willing to forgive ourselves. Sometimes someone's going to provoke us and we are not going to react the way we want to. Same thing. We need to sometimes forgive ourselves and then self-reflect. What am I not going to do in the future? Having that plan is going to help you not keep reverting back to that. But you have to forgive yourself. I know that most of the people I know that have a really hard time forgiving others do not know how to forgive themselves. They don't know how to let things go. And so there's a connection there. And again, I'm not a psychotherapist whose expertise is dealing with that connection between those two, but I do have a lot of knowledge about it. And I have a lot of people in my life who I know clearly struggle between those two things. So it is a thing. And if that's you, my gosh, do the research, get the help that you need. Surround yourself with powerful tools because all of these things collectively in any combination that you decide to use are helping you. They're helping you regain and heal your emotional well-being. And that's what you're after in all of this. So you have to be open to all these different things. We will continue to explore working through unforgiveness and strengthening our forgiveness mindset in the remaining episodes in this series. Until we meet again, may these initial insights and strategies be a lamp unto your path as you walk on this dark and sometimes lonely emotional healing journey.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.